Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, following the 3 H's of the channel. And in this video, it's all about Mexico. Now, there is one of these that's from New Mexico, but I thought I would include it too because it's super interesting. So, if this sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This happened to my dad when he was 14 years old. He was just your normal Mexican kid, and back then he lived right in front of a huge elementary school with a fence surrounding it. This one day, he was playing soccer with his friends in front of his house. It was beginning to get dark. One of his friends accidentally kicks the ball over the fence into the schoolyard. By this time, it's night. There's no street lights. It's too dark. Nobody wants to retrieve the ball. My dad decides to be, the big guy in front of his friends and jumps the fence to look for the ball. He sees the ball in the distance. He approaches the ball. He's thinking at this point that the ball seems to have traveled pretty deep into the schoolyard, especially from where they saw it land. He goes to pick it up, and he notices something strange. Something weird is happening on a water fountain in the distance. He gets closer. He's pretty far away from his friends at this point. Now around the school, there is a dim light, so he can make out what seems to be a doll dancing on top of the water fountain. It's one of those porcelain dolls. The doll dances and drinks from the fountain, and he's thinking, what the hell is going on right now? The doll notices my dad and waves and continues to dance and drink from the water fountain. The fear sets in. He turns around and runs. He runs as fast as he can and jumps the fence. He tells his friends what he just saw. The friends freak out and they go tell their parents. 10 minutes later, a whole mob of parents come. They stand outside the school. This old lady goes in and brings out the specific doll. It's screaming, and they burn it in front of the scared mob. After burning it, the scared mob buried the doll, and they never saw it again. This is something that happened to my grandfather and my uncle in the 1970s. My granddad and my uncle are on the road at night on his bus sometime in the late 1970s. They heard some scratching noises on top of the bus. Minutes later, the bus suddenly stops near a wooded area. They get outside to check the engine. It seems to have overheated. They spot some lights in the wooded area, so they head there to ask for some water to cool the engine. After some minutes walking, they reach the source of the lights. It's an old cabin. They take a look at the window to see if the inhabitants are still awake. It's two very old ladies sitting on a table. There's lots of blood on it. At this point, they're terrified, but they continue to spy on them. The old ladies take off their coats. Their bodies have parts of different animals. I don't remember all the animals, but I remember my grandfather telling me the old ladies had owl feet. The ladies start detaching their animal limbs. The ladies stare at the window and start screaming like crazy when they spot my uncle and grandfather. My granddad and my uncle run as fast as they can back to the bus without looking back, but they can hear them screaming and chasing them. They get to the bus. The engine won't start. But after some tries and yelling, the bus finally is running, and they get away there as fast as they possibly can. Any idea what my uncle and granddad witnessed that night. I'm not an expert on Mexican cryptids or folklore, so I have no idea. I'm going to drop a story that happened to me a few years back. Some will believe it, some won't, but it's the truth. Originally, I thought that Phil Schneider was a liar, but I lived in Dulce, so I planned to poke around the mesa with a friend, and maybe Schneider did lie and just used the legend of the Dulce. I don't know, but here's what happened. It was June of 2015. Me and my friend go poking around an area that we know to have, quote, vents. We find nothing for hours and decide to start walking to the car. As we're walking, my friend begins to freak out. He screams, "It's a vent! It's an effing vent, dude, look!" I call BS, but I run over, and lo and behold, it's a literal vent the size of a car sticking outside of the mesa. I ask my friend, should we go in? What if we die or something worse happens? Eventually, my balls drop and we both go in very quietly. I'm still freaking out because of the legends of the lizard people. We get pretty far in and we find nothing. It's just a really long tunnel. My friend says just a little farther and then we can turn back. Eventually, we come to a door that's locked. We can't go any further than this. My friend says, "No, wait, let's listen for a second to see if we can hear anything." I think, well, what's the harm in that? So, we sit there in silence for a few minutes. Then we start to hear something that sounds like creatures or animals moving around. We start to hear vehicles driving around, and some people are yelling. It sounds like a military installation or something. We hear some language that we've never heard before, mixed with other people speaking English. My friend looks under the crack of the door to see if he can see anything. He says that there's a guy in black fatigues that's just walking around. All of a sudden, my friend jumps up. His face is beet red. He starts running back the way we came. I don't know what he saw, but I'm not sticking around. So I turn around and I chase after him. After we get back to the car, I'm trying to get the story out of him. What did you see? What did you see? He's about to die of a panic attack. He says that he saw a guy in black fatigues, and then lizard legs. Some real Jurassic Park raptor stuff. He literally will not speak about this to me, or go back anywhere near that vent. This supposedly happened to my dad's grandpa, my great-grandfather. It was back in the 50s. My great-grandfather lived in some rural part of Mexico. I don't remember where. There was no power there, no stores, but lots of farm work. The closest city was 4 hours away by horse. So apparently, my great-grandfather was a sort of a player before he settled down. He loved to go to all the dances. They would make out on different farms and small towns. He would often go drinking and dance with as many ladies as he could. This is something he would do regularly, so it wasn't a big deal if he would come home late and drunk. One day, he hears about a dance about 30 minutes away from his home. He gets ready and takes the horse and heads to the dance. He meets a few friends and dances with some girls. One girl in particular catches his attention. Apparently, there was this girl at the dance that was super beautiful, and she stood out from the rest. Him, being a horn dog, starts to talk to her. She says her name is Esther. and that she lives on a local ranch not too far away. They dance the whole night, and he really likes her. It was getting late and dark, so he asks to give her a lift home. The girl agrees, and they set off on the horse. The girl says that she lives to the north. My grandfather asked which ranch that she lives in because he knows all of them in the area. The girl just laughs and tells him to keep going north, that they'll reach it soon. She keeps making small talk with him, and then he realizes that they've been riding for almost 2 hours without any sign of any ranch. He figures that she might be too drunk and offers to take her to his house and then travel to her house in the morning, and she says, "No, I live right here." Grandpa thinks she's joking. They were literally in the middle of nowhere, and it was pitch dark. The girl insists that she lives there. She jumps off the horse and starts dancing in the dark. Great-grandpa tells her to get back on the horse. She replies, "No, let's dance. I want to dance." As she continues to dance, he said if she wanted to dance, that she could go to his ranch. They could play music there, and they could dance where it's safe. The girl continues to dance and doesn't want to stop. Her movements begin to look weird and contorted. Imagine how The Grudge moves in that movie. Grandpa asks if she's okay. The girl keeps on doing this weird, contorted dance that's kind of starting to freak him out. He gets off the horse, and the horse starts acting really nervous. He tries to calm it down, but the girl keeps on dancing more and more erratically. My great-grandpa grabs her shoulder. The girl stops and looks down, facing away from him. Her hair is now covering her face. She starts to cry and asks him if he thinks that she's pretty. My great-grandpa follows with, "Yes, you were the prettiest girl I've ever seen." The girl says, "Are you sure?" She continues to dance and picks up her dress, revealing that she does not have human feet. Instead of legs, there are hooves. And then she turns around to look at my grandpa. Her face is totally corrupted and rotting, flesh falling off, no eyes, no nose. She tells him that she's a demon and asks, "Do you still love me?" and begins to laugh. My grandpa turns pale white and gets back on his horse and books it back to his ranch. Apparently, he didn't speak for the better part of a month, just was so terrified. His family took him to many witch doctors to find out what happened, until he finally told them the story after a whole month of no talking. Before I begin, some quick context is that I've heard this story from both of my late bisabuelos. They were both adamant that this was true and that they were both in a sane state of mind when these events took place. This happened on their farm in rural Lagos de Moreno, sometime in the late 1930s, very early 1940s. My bisabuelos, great-grandparents, are farmers, and they spend the day doing unremarkable farmer stuff, tending to the sugarcane, the corn, the tomatoes, etc. The sun begins to set. My bisabuelo finishes his chores, and my bisabuela, my great-grandmother, cooks dinner for the two of them. During this dinner, they hear a faraway scream that sounds like it might be a man, but they both agree that it's more than likely just a wild goat doing wild goat stuff and screaming its head off for no reason. They shrug it off. Everything goes quiet again. After some time passes, my great-grandfather looks out the window and sees something in the dark. It's a man booking it across their lawn. His shirt and pants are covered in blood. My great-grandfather watches the blood-covered stranger pass out on the ground. They both panic, and they bring him inside and clean and dress his wounds. The blood-covered stranger only has one cut. It's a very deep gash on his forearm. After a while, the bloody stranger wakes up. Mabisibuelos start asking him what happened, what hurt him. The guy doesn't answer. He just stares at them. They figure that he must be in shock. They allow him to finish dinner with them. They keep asking him questions while he eats, but he's silent the whole time. Bisabuelo asks the stranger what his name is, and they actually get a reply. Radale, the stranger says. He says nothing the rest of the night. Now, Radale isn't even a name, it's just a random Spanish word. Mabisibuelos legitimately just assumed that this guy could be stupid. They're just happy that they got something out of him. They decide to let the man sleep in the tool shed for the night. The next morning, they go to check on Radale. He's gone. He left his clothes on the floor of the shed. Mabisibuelos freak out and try to find him, but he's nowhere to be seen. They can't find where he went. They try to go about their business because what else do you do when a naked man escapes from your shed? They go to check on the goats. One of them is dead, basically eviscerated. The corpse is dry and pale. Mabisibuelo describes its skin as cuero de muerte aterradora. The goat was so terrified when it died that you could feel fear in its skin. It seemed that a bruja was on the loose, a witch. They start discussing how to protect themselves from the witch. Do they go to the church for holy water? Do they hire a priest? Etc. During this discussion, one of their neighbors shows up at their house. The neighbor is also the farmer. They immediately can tell that their neighbor is stressed. The neighbor tells them to be careful that he saw an inhuman creature trying to get into his pens last night while he was harvesting sugarcane. The neighbor describes the creature as going against God and unholy. Obviously, he's shaken up. The creature was over 2 meters tall and looked like an owl with human eyes. He says without thinking that he locked eyes with it and it charged at him. He panicked and swung his sugarcane knife and hit it square in the forearm. The realization sets in. Radale had a massive gash in his forearm. He was covered in blood. He didn't talk. He left his clothes behind. Everything is rather suspect. This story always freaked me out when I was younger. My family and I do believe in its validity. What freaks me out, though, is that Radale kind of sounds like Nahuale. In Mesoamerican folklore, a Nahuale are humans that have the power to shapeshift after making a pact with the devil. They are said to drink blood, often from humans. I think that what he actually said was Nahuale, and the only reason that Mabisibuelos weren't eviscerated is because they tried to tend to its wound, and in return, it took their goat's blood instead of theirs. I've heard a lot of screwed up things, and I've had people tell me some even more screwed up stuff. A basic example of this is that when I was a child, I had an imaginary friend who turned out to actually be a ghost. But this isn't about that. This is about something else that happened when I was in Mexico when I was a little older. So I just arrived to my new house from America to Mexico. Mom had left Dad, so everybody's kind of depressed. My new house is actually my grandma's house, but in Mexico, we use concrete and bricks. The atmosphere is very different and very humid. I'm not comfortable, but what can I do? I have to sleep with my mom for some time. But it was cool because the house was spooky when the lights were off and pitch black. My grandma has chickens, turkeys, and dogs. You always hear weird stuff, but after a while, you assume it's just the animals. The room where we slept had a ceiling made of a plastic sheet that's very common in Mexico. It's white and you can kind of see through it. One day, while sleeping, Mom gets out of bed and goes into the hallway. I guess she's going to the bathroom, so I start to fall asleep again. Not even 2 minutes later, I wake up to loud knocks and the voice of my mother praying, in Spanish, obviously. I immediately think, what the hell's going on? So I shake myself awake the rest of the way, and I go out into the hallway and see that she is hitting the ceiling with a broom, kind of hyperventilating. I ask her what the hell's going on. My grandmother shows up and asks the same. No answer. I looked up to see what is it that she's hitting, and I see something that looks like dog paws. Not exactly dog paws. They were much bigger and longer. She stopped hitting them with the broom, and we hear a very loud growl. Not your regular dog growl, in a way that sounded childish, almost like it was laughing. We get freaked out even more when it starts to walk slowly to the edge of the ceiling. It jumps off, and you can hear the thing landing on the grass and walking away. Everyone stood still and looked at each other. My grandfather shows up and asks, "Did you see that?" We kind of didn't know what to do, so we shrugged it off and tried to get some sleep. The next day, we talk about it over breakfast. Grandpa tells us that it was probably a guy that was supposedly a Nahual, the people who turn into animals when they want and do crazy stuff. His name was Ramirez, or that's what he called himself. He lived about 3 houses down, and this guy was actually crazy. His house was disgusting. He had zero hygiene and always looked like that he didn't give a shit. His car was always broken down, always rusted. His whole property smelled like dung when you got near it. He always had a machete in hand and always a cigarette in his mouth, always. Nobody ever saw him eat or go to parties thrown in the neighborhood or barely leave the house. He would always attack drunk people and testigos de Jehovah, basically Mexican Mormons, that would mess with him in his home. All of them would disappear without a trace. No one would talk to him. Once, he killed a 5-year-old, and the parents didn't even do anything to him. So, he used to have a job as a construction foreman, and he was quite good at it. He made enough money so that he could spend his last few years just smoking, and apparently not eating. He used to have a wife, but he would treat her very badly, and he beat her every day. She stayed because he was wealthy, but not for long. One day, she hit him back. Now, the story goes that he took the point of his machete and stabbed her eye out, and cut her tongue, and punched her until she was unrecognizable. What was 100% real was that everyone saw blood in his entrance, and that the ambulance did take her away. The bloodstains are there to this day. He didn't even bother cleaning them. So after explaining this, Grandpa said that he used to work with the guy. He was the leading foreman, and he always treated everyone terribly. He was easier on my grandpa because they were both that tough machismo type of guys. One day, they were alone, and Ramirez said that he was a Nahual, and he made deals with the devil. He offered my grandpa to join him. He absolutely refused. After that, he treated him like total shit. So fast forward, and the dog thing, the Nahual, was trying to get in to their house. Grandpa had an old school shotgun and chased him out, but every shot missed or jammed. They were both outside, and Grandpa had a very clear shot. The Nahual was not moving. He pulls the trigger. Nothing happens. He pulls it again. Once again. Nothing. The Nahual sits there and just stares at him. Grandpa's too scared to go after him alone, so it just turns around, laughs, and leaves. The next day he checks the gun, and everything was fine. He pulls the trigger with the same bullets, and they shoot like normal. After this, we all assumed it was Ramirez trying to get one of the chickens, or worse, trying to get after us. So fast forward to the fall of 2018. My grandpa says that the village has finally ended him, meaning they killed him. The dad of the aforementioned 5-year-old kid got some guys to go with him. Grandpa didn't take part, but told them that guns weren't going to work, so they all went with machetes because this is Mexico. They caught him because they spread out through the forest behind the neighborhood. They got him, and they slashed him to pieces, and no one's had any trouble since then. What are your thoughts? So, what'd you think of those? I've learned that Mexico is a pretty scary place, but I'd still like to visit there if I ever went on vacation. I find all the Aztec stuff and the whole aura of supernatural stuff around Mexico to be super interesting. But, did you have a favorite one? If you did, let me know what it was down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon listed below if you would like to donate to the channel that way, but no pressure. And with that, I thank you for watching the video. If you have another country that you'd like to see a video on, then be sure to post it down below. And if you're new to the channel, or you want to rewatch a video, I'll put some other videos up here now that you can watch if you want to. Other than that, I'll see you next time. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.